Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me today is our tech manager, cybersecurity expert, Jonah Van Tuyl. Jonah, welcome. Thank you.
Dang, it's good to be back.
Well, and you know, the title this week, because we're trying to draw more attention, might lead someone to believe that we are going to delve into the political side of the Arizona election audit. Yeah, I do a lot of things and say a lot of things, but I'm not that stupid.
That's good.
No, we're not doing that. However, there's a part of the election audit that nobody's talking about, and that's the cybersecurity details that came out. You know, the issues with cybersecurity. And I was just through the Naval Postgraduate School, and I had a couple of folks in there, one from the FBI, one from CISA, which is a federal agency that I don't know its letters, but they were cybersecurity experts.
Right.
And some of the things that they talked about, and at the same time, Kingman, the city of Kingman, had been hit with some ransomware.
Yep.
And so between those things, I came to you and I'm like, Jonah, do we do any of this stuff? How do we do it? And I didn't understand. And so I don't know if you know this or not, but at the new chief seminar last week, we had the head of Department of Homeland Security for the state. Okay. He's a cybersecurity guy, so they moved cybersecurity under him. And so,
which is where it should be. So.
One would think. It was somewhere else before, so under like mobile homes. So I asked him as a follow-up, I'm like, can you talk more about cybersecurity? Because quite honestly, fire chiefs, and I think many local governments and private businesses and people don't understand. There's so much to it today. And so he went further. But after this election audit came out, you came to me and said, man, there's a lot of details in this cybersecurity that people need to think about. Not as part of the election audit, or
right.
Is my agency or my business or my personal stuff protected?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I try to do as much as I can in my personal life and my professional life is learn from the mistakes of others. And so, well, I didn't intend for this to end up on the podcast when I mentioned it to you.
Right.
I was going to Home Depot on Friday to pick something up, and I turned on KYCA, and there's this guy speaking my language talking about authorization and accounting and authentication and SQL database. I'm like, who is this guy? And it took me about 5 minutes to figure out kind of what was going on. And I caught most of it. I finished watching the rest of this week, and that's why I mentioned it to you. Is just there were a lot of mistakes that were made in securing the election management system, and it's important for people to understand how the pivotal role that cybersecurity plays in our everyday lives.
Right.
I mean, just recently we've had attacks on pipelines, food supply chains. You name it, it's happening. There was a port that got breached, and the attackers realized what it was, and they said, never mind, we'll leave you alone.
Right.
Like it's a constant thing that's affecting our daily life. So being able to look at something like the findings, the IT findings specifically from the audit, and saying, well, what lessons can we learn from this? And what are we doing as an agency so that we don't make the same mistakes?
Right. And you talked to me about it, and then you sent me the link, and then I watched it, and I glazed over because he wasn't speaking my language.
Right.
I didn't understand what he was saying, but it sounded bad. And I know from, again, the being in the executive leadership program, I reached out to you while I was there and said, hey, Jonah, I have this FBI person, the CISA person, and they're willing to give us the contacts for the cybersecurity units in Phoenix so we can make connection before there's a problem.
Right.
And then you advised me that, hey, look, recently there was a Microsoft patch that Microsoft didn't have at the time, I think it was, and you found that someone had found their way into that vulnerability, but because we had obtained some security software from CISA, it stopped that attack.
Yeah, we can actually go over some of that. That's actually kind of goes into some of the stuff that that Maricopa County was failing to do in regards to the election management system. Now, I have no idea what Maricopa County is doing with the rest of their systems. I'm sure they have a lot of really competent IT professionals. But based on the findings of this, we can look and say, wow, this is what they came out and said. What are we doing that would keep us from making the same mistakes that they made?
Right. And before we get into it, you used the analogy recently, and I can't remember, but it was something with a goalie.
Yeah, I've been doing cybersecurity for a long time. It's as I kind of developed my pathway through IT, I kind of focused on cybersecurity, and it is increasingly you're a goalie. I mean, we are literally trying just to keep people out of our network, keep people from breaching our systems.
Right.
And when you start looking at a lot of the major players in the last 12 months, I mean, I talked to the IT to all the CAFMA managers earlier this year, and in 2018, ransomware was an $8 billion a year industry.
Right.
By 2020, it was a $20 billion a year industry, and it's just going up from there. And so increasingly, you're seeing major players, major corporations that are getting breached. That it's not just that they are getting ransomed, so they have to pay an exorbitant price to get their access to their data. Their data is being leaked on the internet if they don't pay. They're being coerced. It's being threatened. It's very ugly.
Right.
And so we're a small department, So we do everything that we can to make our network as safe as possible,
right?
And to try to guarantee the confidentiality, the integrity, and availability of our systems.
And from what I've seen, because I didn't know what you were doing behind the scenes, I didn't understand. And to be honest with you, and I think a lot of people out there are the same way. I look at CAFMA and say we have 160 employees, 10 stations. We're not a target. We're not a big governmental entity. We don't have a lot of money. But then you showed us one of the monitoring systems you used, and the amount of traffic, especially from overseas, trying to get into our system, like just it's constant. And I had no understanding of that.
Day and night, and we get targeted through all sorts of mechanisms on a daily basis. So just trying to make sure that cybersecurity is something that we're cognizant of and considering, and it's not just a thing that we think about in a reactive sense. It's something that we are proactive about and continuing to try to develop new ways to innovate and to stay on top of the current trends that we're seeing.
Awesome. So where do you want to start?
All right, we got about 5 minutes total of footage that I took off of this, off of the findings of the audit. I would encourage everyone, there'll be a link in the description to watch the full amount of the findings if you are interested. Like you said, your eyes might glaze over. It's very interesting, very telling, and it definitely makes you ask some questions. So we're just going to start off with this first section, we'll see what the findings say.
The last time that the operating system was patched on the Maricopa County election systems was the date that they installed the Dominion software, which was the 6th of August of 2019. Okay, so at the time of election, it had been over a year since that system had been patched. We found that that was also the same case with the antivirus definitions. So we know, as part of this world that we live in, that people are coming up with new ways to hack a system, to exploit vulnerabilities and get unauthorized access to the systems. And they're doing this continually. All major security vendors update their antivirus at least on a weekly basis to make sure that we can protect our systems from these newly originated vulnerabilities and exploits. The last time that the antivirus had been updated on the Maricopa County systems was the 6th of August, 2019. Okay.
All right.
So what does that mean?
That's just inexcusable. I mean, and we'll get more into it in the next section. Sure. It's illuminating. But basically what that means is, consistently operating systems vulnerabilities are found. They're found by malicious actors. They're found by security professionals. Sometimes they're found by the internal audits inside of their own systems. But we're just like almost every other corporation. We're Windows. We use Microsoft Windows, and there's updates that come out periodically for those. Some of them are what you would call an in-band update, which means they come out once a month, the second Tuesday of the month, and there's also out-of-band updates, which are updates that are such emergency updates that the manufacturer will actually release those updates outside of their normal update schedule.
Okay.
we are very serious about applying security patches for our operating systems because we understand the nature of them. In 2021, I've seen more what they would refer to as a 0-day vulnerability than I've ever seen before. And that is vulnerabilities that are being actively exploited that there is no patch for. So when those come out, you have to pay very special attention. As soon as the patch is released, you install it on some type of test system, verify that it accomplishes what it needs to do, it doesn't break something else, and then you deploy it. So a lot of times people come in and they'll call somebody, my computer restarted over the weekend. The reason is because we're applying patches, because we're trying to keep the network secure. The other thing you talked about was antivirus updates. So your operating system is separate than your anti-malware solution, whatever it is you're trying to protect your computer. And those updates happen all the time. I actually looked at ours today before I came here. And I think there were 3 devices that are registered as out of date, and that's because they've been turned off for a few days. Since like Monday. There's a few devices that have been offline for an extended period of time, but all devices that are currently on and connected are up to date with the latest antivirus definitions. So it's common sense. You really need to make sure that the devices that you are connecting, you're updating. I know it gets annoying when Windows wants to restart, or even Macs have to update too, right? In fact, Macs have had some horrible 0-day vulnerabilities in this last year.
It's still better than Microsoft.
It's true. That's not true, but it's true that Macs do get viruses. Forget about those commercials you saw back in the day with I'm a Mac, Macs get viruses too. So you just need to make sure, it's inconvenient, but restart your operating system so those patches can apply. And as far as antivirus goes, again, it's just making sure those definitions are up to date so that if your computer does, accidentally download something, one of your friends sends you a phishing email because they got hacked, that it doesn't compromise your system.
No, absolutely. And I know that my Mac stuff at home, my Apple computers, restart those. And it's quite often, honestly, that my laptop says, hey, I'm need you to restart me so that I can update. And that laptop goes with me, so I turn it off and turn it back on multiple times a day. And I think the other thing with that is, and you may talk about this later, but when I go to a hotel now, I don't connect to the public Wi-Fi. I use the hotspot on my phone, because you had said don't connect to networks that we don't own.
Trust. Yeah, public Wi-Fi. I could dive really deep into this, but public Wi-Fi by nature can be very dangerous because it's really hard for you to authenticate who the person is on the other side that you're connected to. In the IT world, a very common attack is called an evil twin, right? So you take a router or a wireless router, something that can send out a wireless signal. You just name it the same network as the one that is the legitimate network. Then you can go through some attacks to knock all the clients off of the other network so they connect to yours.
Wow.
And so now you can take all that traffic that they're passing and potentially exploit it. So and we also, anytime you have to connect to a network you don't trust, we really want you to use the VPN, which generally it can help, but the best thing to do is just turn your phone into hotspot mode and use that. At least then you trust it. So
absolutely.
So he now will give an explanation as to why they had a reason that they had not updated the operating system since 2019, which again, in the IT world, a year and a couple of months it's an eternity, right? There's so many things that are coming out. So antivirus hadn't been updated, and neither had the Windows operating systems. And now he's going to tell us why.
Maricopa County did release a statement saying that if they had patched the operating system or if they had updated the antivirus, that would have invalidated the EAC certification for the voting system itself. Obviously, there are a couple of issues with this position. And the first one is that we are relying on a certification system that would impose obsolescence instead of security in the very act of trying to secure a voting system. That is nonsensical, and it should never occur.
All right. So
Nonsensical.
nonsensical. So
Okay.
EAC stands for the Election Assistance Commission. So they have a whole, you can go, it's eac.gov. You can go
Right.
and check to their website and see all of the documentation they have. I tried to find it. There's a few things on there that were like, hey, here's this certification. I got a bunch of 404 errors. Like there's
Right.
links are broken on their website. But basically what they're saying is the EAC certified their election workstations the day that they were installed.
Okay.
Based on the configuration of that day, and that to update the security patches or the antivirus would then invalidate the certification. So to maintain the certification would demand that devices not be secured in order to keep them secure.
That doesn't make sense.
I'm not sure that's you're going into this like downward spiral of cyclical reasoning.
As an aside, that's like talking to DHS about ambulance transport. Just saying.
I have no comment.
Yeah.
So, wow. When you think about that, obviously, if you're stuck in a catch-22, you're stuck in a catch-22.
Sure.
Obviously, something needs to change there. So, kind of what we do as an agency is we do not create policies that are meant to secure us that keep us from being able to secure us.
Makes sense.
Right. So what that means is if there was some policy or certification that we had to maintain that required us to not secure our systems in order to maintain the certification, I think we would sit down and say, do we need the certification?
Right.
Do we have to continue the certification? Because it's actually keeping us from being able to secure our systems.
Well, and how often, if we need to keep the certification and we need to maintain security, how often do the machines need to be recertified?
Right, exactly. So what does that process look like? And anticipating, hey,
Right.
the election's coming up. We know it's coming. It's August 2019. It's coming up next year. For us, it would be, hey, we know that we're going through this certification process in 12 months. We need to make sure that we are ready to go through that process again, and
Right.
that all of our systems can be updated prior to the utilization of that. So it's one of those things where you're creating something that you're attempting to secure yourself, but in the end, you're making yourself less secure. And
Wow.
here's a great example of what that
Right.
can be. If you tell people to create passwords that are too complex,
Right.
or you're making them change too often, that's an example of this. Because what happens if someone has to change their password every 30 days, every 60 days,
Right.
and they make it too complex, and you make it the complexity too much, guess where the password's going to end up? Underneath their keyboard, right? Because they are not going to be able to remember it. So they're going to write it down and stick it somewhere where they can see it easily. I've seen them on monitors, right? Here's the password. So in an attempt to make something more secure
Right.
by enforcing a policy, you have now effectively made it less secure because you are creating a situation where people can't remember their passwords and are
Right.
writing them down somewhere else.
So my passwords are way more secure than that. They're not on my desk. They're not on the monitor. I have a file folder with Post-it notes, and they're right
I
there.
really hope that's not true.
It is. I can show you.
We might scrub that from the public's known. So if your network is truly air-gapped, okay, so air-gap
Right.
is a term in IT that says this network at no time connects to the internet.
Okay.
Or it only connects to the internet at specific intervals that you are controlling. So
Okay.
like a physical cable, I'm walking into this place. We need to run some software updates on these computers. I'm going to physically plug it in the wall.
Okay.
It now has internet access while I am monitoring it. And then when I'm finished, I'm going to unplug it from the internet.
Okay.
That is a legitimate use case for possibly avoiding updates on a regular schedule. I would still argue that if you are ever connecting to the internet for any reason, even if you are plugging in an air gap momentarily, they should be updated. But if it's never connected to the internet, obviously no one necessarily can attack it unless they have physical access to it. And if they have physical access to it, you've got other problems.
Well, and I think he pointed out in there too that there were, and I don't know what these things are, but exe files and other things that
Right.
had been updated in the system that changed the original
Yeah.
certified system.
That's correct. There are thousands of files that have been changed since the certification. So it would lead you to say, well, if you could change those files or update those files or add those files, why couldn't you run your updates? So for us, the lesson learned is, man, let's make sure that we're not putting policies on ourselves that are
Right.
keeping us from securing our systems. Now, I will admit that I err on the side of security.
Right.
So there's always this balance of like security and usability. Even today, one of our technicians was trying to email someone in Colorado. Little did he know that his email server was in Latvia. It's a legitimate company. We've done business with before. He's like, hey, they're not getting my emails. Oh, yeah. Look at his emails in Latvia. Like his email server's in Latvia. Yeah, it's not going to get there. I got to put an exception in. So we don't allow indiscriminate access out of the network, ports or services or destinations, because a lot of those things aren't necessary.
Yeah.
And some of the attacks that you've seen over the years have been because people just created an ability for someone to access the internet indiscriminately, to kind of favor on the usability side. I'm just not that way. Like the more secure, the better, in my opinion.
Well, and we're taking another step, and you are chartering a cybersecurity committee for our agency. And now the people on the committee besides you are pretty clueless when it comes to computer stuff. But I think that the learning opportunity for them to better understand cybersecurity and the need, at the same time, we'll be able to vet policies together to make sure that we, the end user, are not setting policies that screw up the cybersecurity side for you, the person securing our system.
Right. Like, hey, you know what? Every station, we want a computer outside that's on all the time and logged in. Yeah. No, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So like just walking through some of that stuff. I'm excited for the cybersecurity to meet next month and for us to kind of get that kicked off. So
yeah, I think it's a great move.
All right, let's move on and see who talks about next.
Let's talk a little bit about log management here. So there is a federal statute that requires the preservation of election-related materials for 22 months after the date of the election. That applies not only to paper, but that also applies to digital artifacts. Maricopa County failed to preserve the operating system security logs to cover the dates of the election. They provided security logs early in the audit process, but they did not provide the Windows security log itself. When we examined the EMS server, we found that the dates covered by the security log only went back as far as the 5th of February 2021. Now there's a couple reasons for that, and we'll go into those later, but the bottom line is that they failed to preserve those logs, or at least those logs were not turned over to the auditors. And so I'm assuming, since they were part of the subpoena, that those should have been provided had they been present.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier, and I'll just correct. It wasn't
Okay.
CISA that gave us. We actually got from the Arizona Department of Homeland Security. So
Okay.
we got a grant from Arizona Department of Homeland Security for something called a SIM.
Okay.
So understanding how logs work, anytime you do something on a computer, it creates a log of it. So
Right.
not necessarily like I press this letter, it creates a log. It's I opened this application
Okay.
crashed, I logged in, I logged out. Any type of service that is starting or stopping or a
Right.
scheduled task, it keeps a log of those things. So by default, logs in Windows aren't very big.
Right.
They probably could take 30 to 60 days before it starts overriding the oldest log.
Right.
So it's kind of this cyclical process. So with that in mind, if we ever had a cybersecurity event and let's say someone gained access to our network 3
Right.
months ago and we didn't know it, how would we go back and recreate and understand what happened? So we applied for a grant from Arizona Department of Homeland
Okay.
Security for a security information and event management system. So that basically takes these logs from all sorts of sources. For us, it's the most critical sources. I don't need logs from every single person's workstation. That's just kind of useless. But for important services, whether it's email or security logs like
Right.
he's talking about, we want to capture all of that information and store it centrally so that if something happens, we can go back and find it really easily. It has already, as you mentioned earlier, helped us when there was a 0-day attack against our email server. I was able to go back and verify when they initially touched our network, what they were able to do, and in the end, verify they didn't actually gain access, which
Okay.
informed our decisions of what to do moving forward.
Right.
For us, we still did a fresh installation. Like anytime we see that type of exploit, and someone even in any way, even if it's non-malicious or they
Right.
didn't actually obtain any data, just wipe and reinstall.
And how many days did it take? Because I know we were down on email if we were outside of the agency for a day or two or something.
Right. So the reason for that was just, okay, if someone is accessing the system externally, we're just going to cut them off completely. And the inconvenience to that was people couldn't get email outside of
Right.
our network for a few days. It took us a couple of days to rebuild and migrate everybody's data. It wasn't a very painful process. I've done it a number of times before. But being able to go back and say, hey, they originally touched us on the 26th of February, and as late as the 8th of February, they were trying to deploy a payload onto our server, but they were denied by our firewall. Thank goodness. Their firewall did its job because they were coming from Great Britain or China or somewhere outside of the United States. Wow. So we dodged a bullet there, but let's go ahead and wipe and reinstall. But if we didn't have that log system, it would have been much more difficult for us to go through and correlate everything into a timeline and see what it is. So it's a little sad to me that something that important wasn't done for this specific use case. So we can learn from that and say, hey, we're doing this. It's really important that we maintain these logs. And for the amount of data that we're creating, it will years. I mean, 22 months, no problem. So
that should have been there. I think my message on that one to executives or senior staff folks, anybody really who's not on the cybersecurity side of things, not in tech, right? Because I was out of town when that happened. And so my only access to email was that, which meant for several days I wasn't going to be able to get anything. However, because of my exposure to cybersecurity through the Naval Postgraduate School, I just said, well, I would rather have that than what could have happened or be in the position that Chief Rhodes was in Kingman.
Yeah.
So be patient. If your tech person says, this is what we have to do, but it's going to be inconvenient for a few days, suck it up and accept the inconvenience, but the security of your system, because in the long run, you're far better off.
Absolutely. It's exponentially less expensive to prevent a cybersecurity attack than to have to respond or react to one.
Oh yeah.
I mean, millions and millions of dollars you're talking about in a lot of these. So it's been a good, thanks to DHS for helping out with that. And
different DHS, not
Arizona,
Department of Health Services.
Yeah, Arizona Department of Homeland Security. And the reality was that we just installed it about a week before that whole thing happened.
Right.
So the timing couldn't have been better for us. So, all right, now he's going to talk about something that I felt was, and I think you'll agree, it was by far the most egregious out of all of this, and hopefully can shed some light on better ways that we can do things.
Right.
Next item there is credential management. This is probably the most offensive item on this list to me because it carries such a huge impact on the securability of a system. What we found is that for the election management system, the adjudication systems, the ICCs, and all of the voting-related systems, they all shared a common password for both user accounts and for administrative accounts. And just to be crystal clear, it was the same password for all those accounts. So to complicate matters as well, those accounts had not been changed since the installation of the software. So they were established on the 6th of August 2019 and never changed. There furthermore was not an individual accountability of the users who access specific accounts so that you could tie a username, an action, and an individual when you discovered something that was an anomaly.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, shared accounts and
oh man,
passwords
for an IT professional, this is just really is a nightmare. especially for any type of system that needs to maintain a certain amount of security. So in IT, there is what they call the 3 A's. You have authorization, authentication, authorization, and accounting.
Okay.
Authorization is kind of fundamental. Authentication is fundamental to the idea of each person having a unique identity.
Right.
Authorization is what provides you access when you gain into a system.
Sure.
What parts of the system do you have access to? And then accounting helps you understand who did what and when.
Right.
Shared accounts are very common in an effort to simplify usability. So again, we talked about usability versus security. It's way easier to have one admin account and have multiple people have access to that admin account.
Right.
But when someone goes in and deletes all the records, who did it, right? And how do you prove who did it? So what we do and why. I think that it's so important, people understand that they have a unique username, which all of our users do, and that they change their password regularly. That helps that authentication piece.
Yes.
We do have a rotating schedule for our passwords. I know it's a pain to change your password, but it's good because the opportunity for that password to be written down or handed to somebody else. I always think of the Seinfeld where George has his pin for his ATM card is Bosco. You remember this? And he's like, what situation would I ever have to tell someone my pin? And the guy gets his jacket caught in the ATM machine while there's a fire. It's like Seinfeld. But like
the show about nothing.
But they should have a unique identity and a password that they do not share with others, so that if something happens on their account, that there is a way to go back and tell actually who did it. We use some shared accounts here and there. They are very limited in scope, and they are very targeted in what they are doing. An example is our MDTs. We don't want to have captains having to log in every day into an MDT. So the MDTs have a shared login, and they don't have access to anything. They literally can only run the MDT software. There's nothing else
they can only do MDT things.
Exactly.
And for those who don't know, that's a mobile data terminal. And those are the computers that are in all of our engines and some of our response vehicles.
Yes. And it's another one of the reasons that we're deploying a new access control system, right? So we want to be able to know if someone gained access to a specific place. Let's say they were injured. Something happens. We don't know where this person is. We're trying to find them. We can go in the access control system and see the last place they gained entry to at the time they get entry. Maybe we're seeing some anomalous activity. Why the heck do we have a firefighter trying to get into admin at 2:00 in the morning? Oh, then we find out, you lost your card. Oh, okay. Now we can go check the security cameras and see who potentially is trying to use your card to gain access to a building. So, and that's why it's important. If you lose your card, please tell us.
Yeah.
So we can issue it, remove your old card and give you a new one.
Let's just be clear. Firefighters lose everything. There are probably so many lost cards out there right now.
Yeah, and some of those cards are a little old too. I know.
Right.
I know some of you want to update your pictures. Maybe you've been promoted. You want your new title on your card.
It's very nice.
But it's one of the reasons that we're doing that is specifically for the accounting purpose, being able to see who is getting access to what and when.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate the security measures that you've implemented in the stations with the cameras outside, the motion detected cameras around fleet, the cybersecurity. I mean, we're just trying to ensure that everything within our organization is where it should be and is secured, and that we have the ability to go back and double check things or look if we need to. We're not watching you all day long. I remember
Trust me, I don't have the time.
I remember when we first got cameras on computers in fire stations, and everyone's like, "What is that?" And they're putting tape over. I'm like, they're not watching us. I don't have time for that.
Oh man,
I have work to do. But it's important to maintain the sanctity of the organization, the safety of our personnel, and to ensure that we can continue to operate. Because, as I said, we are a target.
We are,
and because we know we're a target, we have to put the things in place that allow us to continue to operate.
Absolutely. All right, last clip. Here we go. This is the conclusion.
So I appreciate your diligence and your patience on this. And as we think about what I've talked about today, it really boils down to accountability, right? And making sure that our election systems are secured. I will tell you that they were not, based on any measure that I, as a IT professional, performing countless vulnerability assessments and incident responses, that I have occurred, had a client that engaged me, had this state of a network, it would have resulted in a failure on our audit. So at this point, I would like to remind people that from a totality of what these findings are, there simply is no accountability by anyone accessing these devices. You had shared passwords. You had shared user accounts. You had remote access. If someone could get access to this system, they wouldn't need a zero-day exploit. Okay. The systems were so far out of date from a security compliance standpoint that it would have taken the average kitty hacker less than 10 minutes using Metasploit to hack this system. Okay. And I would like to remind everyone that's listening to this that when you have a network of computers like you have in these voting systems, it only takes one person bringing in a little hockey puck with admin access to provide external remote access to that voting system. And in the situations where you don't have accountability, you have shared usernames and you have shared passwords, you simply cannot guarantee the security and the accountability on those systems.
So basically what it comes down to, what we can take away kind of from what he said,
Okay.
closing was a large part of cybersecurity is following best practices and processes.
Right.
We really need to be sure that we are securing our systems and following the best way to do those.
Sure.
Sometimes I know it's easier to set up a system that's insecure because you're just trying to get it up and running.
Right.
But thinking from a security perspective, making sure that from beginning to end that you're taking security in consideration.
Right.
The other part of that is continuing to train our users as they are the front line.
Train and test.
Train and test. So our users are the front line. The first people that are going to get attacked are going to be our users. That could be through a phishing email.
Right.
It could be through some social engineering, someone calling on the phone and saying, hey, this is so-and-so. I'm trying to renew your insert IT jargon.
Right.
And trying to find and get information about our network, or maybe someone piggybacking and following someone into a building,
right,
or into a security area where they shouldn't be. They're our front line of defense. So we train them, we test them. But it's also important that they continue to report something
right,
that looks suspicious that they're not too sure about. I got a call this morning from Captain Kuykendall because he got a test phishing email and he was really suspicious of it, and he was on his phone, so he couldn't report it easily. So he called me and said, oh yeah, congratulations, you passed the test.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's what we want. We want people to call us. We want people to contact us when they see something that's suspicious. Because like the closing statement said, that it doesn't take a lot for someone to gain access to a system. And he referenced something called Metasploit. Metasploit is a framework for people to easily, basically has a bunch of hacking tools all built into a single system. And he's right. With the right exploit, it takes a few keystrokes and a few seconds to have full admin control over a workstation. And from there, you can spread out laterally over a network and elevate your privileges. And
wow.
So
yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's very complex, but the simplest thing we can do is to train our users and to be proactive in what we're doing. And if you see something suspicious, just report it, tell it to us. Hey, this computer showed up. It wasn't here yesterday. What's this computer all about? Oh yeah, we came over there to set that up for this purpose. Or, hey, that's a non-agency computer plugged into the agency network. We need to remove that and take a look at it and see what it is. So,
Well, and that phishing button has helped me a lot with Chief Tharp's emails because it clears out my inbox. Oh, Tharp, phishing. But no, it's true. And there's emails that I'll send to you and say, hey, legitimate, not legitimate.
Yeah.
Some of them you come back and say it's legitimate, but it's a sales thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, got it. Other times it's, no, that was not a legitimate email. That was phishing and it wasn't a test.
Yep.
So I know I'm trying to get better. I think the people in admin are trying to get better. I think the folks in the field are trying to get better. But I think that's key is what you said, is train and test. Something that a lot of people may not know is that before you were hired, we actually, and I don't think there's a lot of governmental agencies our size that do this, but we hired a company to come in and do an audit of our systems. Yeah. And they helped us develop the job description and posting so that we could hire you, who ultimately got the job. And then what we did was we took that audit and we said, here you go.
Yep.
Tell us what you think of this.
Yeah, and there was a lot of really good stuff in that audit. We have not implemented every one of the recommendations because we found alternate controls to put some of those things in place. But I feel like a vast majority of what the findings that came back from that we've been able to put into practice and has made a huge improvement for us for our interaction with our users and by far our security. There were, if you stop and become stagnant when it comes to cybersecurity, it is going to end badly. Yes. So we cannot be stagnant. We need to continue to innovate, to move forward, to look for new solutions, and to be continually educating ourselves as to how can we follow these the trends and protect ourselves from them. So,
well, and just to give a shout out because you were complimentary of the audit. I think it's Kingston Business Solutions. Kingston is the name. Up here in Prescott, Philip, great guy, good people to work with, and they did an outstanding job with what they did for us, including helping us recruit the right IT professional to lead our tech division.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here because otherwise we'd be clicking on all kinds of stuff and be in trouble. And I know just from the Arizona Fire Chief side, my email is spoofed all the time, and people are getting emails that look like they're from me, but they're phishing emails.
Yep.
And so, and the other chiefs will email me and say, hey, your IT department. I'm like, look, this is originating from outside of our system. There's nothing we can do about it.
Right. So what's happening is they can't spoof our email address. So if they try to spoof your email address, I won't share publicly what that is here, but if they try to spoof your email address, it will get blocked. But what they're doing is they're spoofing your name. Right. They create a random email account and they just say, well, my name is Scott Freitag. And so when someone else gets the email, they don't look at the email address next to the name. They just say, hey, this is from Chief Freitag. So tip for everyone out there, if you're getting random emails with a person's name that looks a little weird, check the email address, make sure it's actually coming from the person that it says that it is.
I'm typically not emailing people asking them for money. Please get. I'm
because you're stuck in Mexico.
I'm stuck somewhere and I need money, or about that thing that we discussed and I'm going to need money for. That's not me sending those emails, and you don't have to forward them to me because I can't do anything with them.
Yep.
But thank you for not. And Chief Rhodes is really good at that because, well, he's a little gun shy. He wasn't.
He would be, I'm sure.
He was not at fault for Kingman.
So bad
absolutely,
for them.
But
I feel so bad for them.
Unfortunately, that city got hit pretty hard. But again, this is why cybersecurity is so important. And I know there may be some of our folks internally that'll go cybersecurity off, but really, I hope they take the time to listen because it's vitally important that our systems continue to work. It's not just our systems, the CAD system, for example. So really invest in the IT systems. One last recommendation for people that I learned. So when you buy a router, it comes with this password unique to your router that has all these different things on it. And you're like, there's no way anybody's going to figure that out. I didn't know that there's actually like the, whatever you said the other stuff was, meta something, where people can hack things. But there's systems they use and they know all the random generated passwords. They just have to figure out which one's yours. And I'm like, oh, crap.
Yeah, and it just, I would say, make sure you're updating your systems. Make sure you're not avoiding those, and pay attention when you get that little notification. Hey, there's an update.
Right.
It's not just Microsoft trying to annoy you. It's not just Apple and Tim Cook trying to make you reboot your computer. There's security professionals that are out there that are genuinely concerned with the security of your system, that are working day and night to try and keep those systems secure.
Right.
Apply your updates.
And it is important to use a unique password. Don't use the same one over and over again. And
don't write it down and stick it on the monitor.
I'm actually getting better at trying to figure out ways when I change my password to develop something or create something that I'll remember, but is unique with different characters and everything else in it. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying.
Good job.
I'm getting better. So, Jonah, I appreciate you coming on. And I know when you sent me that, you were like, oh, no. Because what I said was, hey, this would be a great title for this. And you're like, I am not going on politics. But really, that was not my intent today. And the intent was certainly not to throw stones at Maricopa. It's to take the information that we have available and break it down piece by piece and explain why it's important.
Yep.
Not just to election integrity, but to your organization, your personal home, your business. You really need to focus on that. So between now and next week's episode, change your passwords, right? Change the password. If you have a router and you didn't change the password when you got it, go do that now. Don't click on random crap. Just stop it. Stop the clicking, and make sure you're paying attention. But so until next week, be cyber secure. We appreciate you tuning in. We have some excitement next week related to ambulance transport. Should be fun.